This week I was totally just trying to let Matt catch up a little bit and wasn't struggling at all. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to week 3 of Monthly Mayhem OMG63 edition, where we're taking the Traxxas AMG63 6x6 and trying to turn it into a top speed machine. Last week you saw this and we had done a number of changes at that point already. We had adjusted the gearing, overdrive gears in all of the axles. We had installed the VXL 8S system with the 2400 kV 540 XL motor. I had also switched to Proline reaction tires on Proline wheels, and we were testing with a 3S 5200 milliamp LiPo. Since then, a lot has changed, as you can see. You will see since then that we've changed up the wheel and tire package. I bought some 17mm adapters and put on these much more flashy pre-mounted Bandito tires on Duratrax wheels. They're black chrome, bigger wheel overall. I think they look much more G63 appropriate. And that's why I picked them up. Now, these tires are non-belted, so they do grow at speed, which will help my rollout slightly. However, it did raise a little bit of concern for me as far as the tires touching between the two rear axles. But after some initial just testing on, the bench and seeing how they grew once they running down the road, I don't suspect that that's actually going to be much of an issue. Now, also the truck has been lowered considerably. I disassembled all of the shocks on the vehicle and I put in a 1/2 inch of fuel tubing underneath of the shock piston on all of the shocks to bring it down much further. It's about half of the stroke of the shock. So the truck still has plenty of suspension movement, but not nearly as much as it had before. Brought the ride height down, got this thing much closer to the ground. And then while reassembling the shocks, I filled them all with 60 weight oil to try and slow down the movement a little bit. Last week, we saw some exaggerated suspension movement when the axles were all locked. Thought that maybe sway bars would be a good fix for that. I haven't had time to fab sway bars up though, so just a heavier shock fluid, some stiffer suspension with a bunch of preload and limited shocks, and this thing feels pretty stable at this point. And then last week also I discussed that I had thrown that VXL 8S system in here and just kind of Velcro strapped it in place. So one thing that I wanted to get accomplished was designing and 3D printing a mount to properly put that ESC in there so I could mount it rigidly in place, but also be able to remove it when needed. So I accomplished that by just designing up a quick mount in Fusion 360, 3D printing it, dropping it in the chassis. Super simple design. And then after all of that, I got on to working on my Aero package. Now, with the speeds that we're currently hitting, Aero is not the, craziest, most just critical thing in the world. The Aero on this is probably 40% performance and 60% style. But I think that's also a very fun part of these projects, so I dove in. Now, I recently picked myself up a new Stepcraft D600 CNC router. If you're not familiar with CNC routers, it's basically just a desktop CNC machine that you can use to cut a variety of materials. They're great for wood, plastics, non-ferrous metals in general. I believe that this machine is going to fit my needs very well. And I took advantage of having it and used it quite a bit this week. I just got the machine and the very first parts that I cut were for this project. For this project, I'm designing everything in Fusion 360. It's a free program you can download, draw all kinds of parts in it. It's great for people who are trying to get into designing parts for 3D printing, or if you're looking to expand into other ways of manufacturing, it's also very powerful for that as well. So this project I've dove in 360 pretty deep. Now, the first thing I did was create this base plate out of 1/4 inch Delrin for the front air dam to all kind of be based off of. The design attaches to the chassis in 4 positions, where that front AMG63 bumper kind of had that silver underpan portion. I've maintained that piece in place, and this goes on the bottom of that. That gave me a nice big platform around the front where I could then add a number of other components. I took and designed some 3D printed portions that go underneath of that 1/4 inch Delrin part, and then that gives me this surface to mount this Lexan front air dam. I used Lexan for that because it's got a little bit of flex. If I hit a curb or a rock or the pavement or whatever it is, it can flex out of the way. But if it breaks, it's also very easily replaceable. Now, also those parts that I use to actually bolt this to, I did in multiple sections. That way, if I do take a nasty front crash and end up breaking those parts, maybe I don't have to replace all of them. Maybe I can just replace the ones that were broken. It was a very simple change in the design that could save me a lot of time if I ran into an incident like that. I designed the Lexan piece in CAD as well, and I designed it as a sheet metal part, and that allowed me to create a flat pattern. It kind of unfolds into this, like you would expect, a flat pattern. And then I could cut that Lexan out on my CNC router as well, so that it aligns perfectly with the 3D printed parts that attach to the Delrin piece that I cut on the machine as well. It may sound like a slightly overcomplicated thing, but in general, it was so much faster to design, fabricate, and have replacements for this whole setup than any other way that I felt I could have done it. I got all of the supplies for this from a local plastic supply shop and didn't cost me that much, and I have a lot extra for a number of projects that I'm sure I'll come up with in the future. Now, I also have a section of 3D printed parts that go on top of that air dam base, and that is like the bottom part, made out of multiple 3D printed parts, and then there will also be a Lexan piece that goes across the top there. I designed that part later and just haven't cut the upper air dam portion yet. I also plan to replace the clear Lexan with some black that I picked up also, and I'll do both the lower and upper, kind of just black out this whole section, make it look a little bit cleaner. From there, you can also see that we have some side ground effects going on as well. These pieces, like the front, are a combination of 3D printed and CNC cut. I created a base plate that bolts to the rock sliders. And then there's a vertical piece of plastic that hangs down, and that's what creates the height for these side ground effects. One other thing that I did want to incorporate though is I did want to leave the side exit exhausts in place. So I made sure and model those fairly accurately to where they actually exited, so that I could make sure that those side ground effects pieces went around that and, you know, kind of left those exiting the vehicle like you would expect. And finally, that ties into a lower 3D printed part. Now, the design of the side ground effects has kind of a sweeping design. So any air that comes off of the front tire should be directed into that area, and it kind of moves it out. It's got a large radius that should help move the air out and away from the rear tires. And finally, all of it is tied together with a solid underpan. Now, the plastic that I used for this is an expanded PVC foam. It's kind of like a halfway point between a rigid plastic and a foam board that you might be familiar with for crafting or things like that. So it has some decent strength to it, but it is very lightweight. After cutting the pieces out, there's just almost no weight to it at all. The 3D printed parts that bolt to this are heavier than the foam board itself. We discussed the side ground effects that help mount this and keep it down low to the ground. Up in the front, I created some other 3D printed parts, and I created the actual curvature that I wanted this underpan to have into those 3D printed parts. So then when I bolt this lower pan to those 3D printed parts, it gave me that front curve, and that helps this thing tuck up and away from the bottom edge of that front air dam, just to make sure that no air is coming under this and catching the bottom of that underpan and then creating an excessive amount of drag. The distance of the underpan to the actual surface is about an inch or so, and under full compression of the wheels, I still have about a ½ inch of clearance between this and the surface. That is just in case of, you know, some significant imperfections in the surface that I hit, bottom out the suspension. I don't want this dragging. If anything were to happen and I had a bad crash and I destroyed the underpan though, again, super simple to recreate this part on the router, hit cut, and I could have a new one in just a couple of minutes. Now, there was a significant amount of design work though in all of these parts. And again, that's part of what I find the enjoyment in. So I really enjoyed creating all of this, and I like the way that it looks. I haven't completed the rear portion of this underpan yet, and I will do that. It will incorporate a rear diffuser to kind of help smooth the air and let it exit the backside of this vehicle cleanly. But so far the design work has been started and I just haven't finished it. I'll get to that before we get to next week, however. But now let's get into the actual test results from this week. All right, so we're here at the road to test. It's, I don't know, about 7:30 at night. It's still super hot. It's about 100 degrees. As far as running gear, the same as it was last time, with the exception of the new Bandito tires, which are a little bit taller. We're still running on 3S right now, so we should see similar numbers to last time. Inside of this little LiPo bag is our 4S battery though, in case everything goes well. Motor temp is at 98.7, so gives us a base. 12.4 is what the battery's reading. Top speed's at 0. All right, top speed of 54 again. So basically unchanged. ESC temps at 137, let's check motor. $120, $130, I think we're okay. Truck feels super planted. The motor temps are good after 2 pulls, 3 pulls even. 4S. All right, let's go 4S. All right, 5200 milliamp 4S is installed. 16.6. Traffic's clear. Here we go. $55 is all. We did not pick up much. Motor temps are good, 130. $55 again. Something about that top speed makes me wonder. So I switched the model to this X01 that has 120 mile an hour top speed. I'm just gonna see if that thing changes anything. All right, traffic's clear, here we go. We're slowing down, 45. I don't know what's going on. Okay, we're back at the test spot. I've changed the gearing. I'm only expecting to have to do a couple of runs to make a decision whether I was over or under geared. I think that I was over geared, even though my temperatures weren't getting out of hand. So 4S in the car, changed the pinion to a 15. We got a little bit more traffic today, or this time of day at least, but we're gonna give this thing a shot. So let's hit it. All right, it is nuclear hot out here. Let's see what the road temp is. Got the app on, Traxxas app, reset to 0. Let's see what this thing does. And my top speed is 56 is all. Maybe it could only be the difference of just a slightly more favorable run than another. And what turned into my last run of the day, I was at top speed, let off the gas to try and start to slow down even with a minimal brake, and I completely cleaned the teeth off of my 39 tooth spur gear. Just as polished of a spur gear as I've ever accomplished in an RC. So that ended my testing for the week basically, and my new top speed now is 56 on 4S after 54 on 3S. This week was a struggle. So as I sit here now, it's Tuesday night. I have repaired the vehicle. I changed back to the stock 45 tooth spur gear versus the 39 tooth that I put in there. I left the 15 tooth pinion. We're gonna see if gearing down is going to help me pick some speed up, because I've got some definite testing to do. I think that I went way too far with my gearing. I thought that I was going to be in a reasonable range for the power system that we put in there. So over the next week, before the next video, I'm going to be adjusting gearing, doing as much testing as possible, finishing that rear aero, and completing a rear wing. I had a wing on there for some of my initial testing. After a little bit of an incident, I need to replace it. And I'm also gonna go with something quite a bit smaller and off the back. And I've also, I believe, chosen the phrase that I'm gonna put on there, but I've got to narrow it down a little bit. I also need to find somebody here in Sacramento with a vinyl cutter to cut out the actual phrase that I plan to put across there. Thank you everybody for the awesome suggestions though. There was some definite good ones in there. One other thing that I am going to change up though is I am going to put on a new set of Proline Hoosiers all the way around on this. I think these are a good looking tire with the big Hoosier letters around. I picked up 3 sets of those, 3 new sets of Proline Pomona wheels, and I think most importantly, some Crawler Innovations heavyweight 2230 foams. Now, there's some nice advantages to these foams. One, they are much lighter than the foams that come in the Hoosiers stock. That's a big bonus. I think that reducing the amount of rolling mass on this vehicle could help me pick up some speed as well. So that's one reason that I really want to change to these tires. But also these foams will help limit the expansion that those tires see. Crawler Innovations just released these foams and I think they're gonna be a winner. So my overconfidence last week in thinking that I was easily going to be able to hit my speed was absolutely crushed this week after several just less than enthusiastic runs. Matt knows what my top speed is for this week, but he has not told me his, which makes me a little bit nervous. So I'm going to eat my slice of humble pie, get back to work and do more testing. I'm just gonna say though, if we don't have some drastically improved results by the time next week's testing is over, the final week is absolutely going to see some 6S runs. We will exceed 63 miles per hour. It is going to happen. It is going to happen. I was way too confident in week 2. I do have some other new parts on the way as well, some things that we're going to change, some tuning that we're going to make, and we're gonna push this thing further and faster. I promise. I will not lose another monthly mayhem. After all the talking about the phrase that I was so confidently gonna put on that rear wing, I think that I'm gonna have to come up with some sort of apology phrase to put on the bottom. So there's your project for this week, class. I think I might as well get my order in with the sticker guy for both of them ASAP. But that's gonna do it for this week. As always, thanks for watching, guys. Hit the like button if you enjoy it, subscribe if you're not already, and hit the notification bell so you see the videos as soon as they get uploaded. We'll see you back here next Wednesday for week 4 of the Monthly Mayhem. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.